The night was colder than usual on Orion 5. A thin mist crawled between the broken metal buildings, wrapping everything in a ghostly silver glow. In the lower district, where the city's rich never came, the air smelled of rust and smoke. Kira sat on the ground beside an empty shop. Her knees pulled close to her chest. Her thin blanket was more holes than fabric, and the wind cut through it like sharp knives. She had been hungry for 2 days. Her stomach growled. But there was nothing she could do. The food stalls were guarded by humans and other species who would throw her away the moment they saw her face. Kira was not one of them. She was different, her skin a faint shade of silver blue, her eyes too large and bright to pass as human. People noticed her in an instant, and in this part of the galaxy, different meant dangerous. A hover bus rumbled by, its bright lights flashing against her eyes. For a moment, the warmth from its engines brushed over her. She closed her eyes, pretending it was the heat of a real fire. But the sound faded, and the cold returned. Worse than before, voices passed by. 2 men in dark jackets glanced at her, but quickly turned away. Others didn't even look. It was easier to ignore someone than to help them. Kira had learned that long ago. Above her, the neon signs buzzed. One blinked so often it made the street look like it was breathing. Far away, a siren wailed, followed by the thumping sound of mechanical boot security drones patrolling the streets. Kira pulled her blanket tighter, sinking deeper into the shadows. If the drones scanned her, they would know she had no ID. No ID meant prison. Or worse, the wind carried the smell of fried food from a nearby stall. Her mouth watered. She imagined the taste, the warmth, the way it would fill her empty stomach. But she stayed still. She had no credits. And stealing here was not just dangerous, it was deadly. Hours passed slowly. The street grew quieter. Kira tried to sleep, but every noise kept her awake. Clanking pipes, whispering wind, footsteps somewhere in the dark. Then she felt it. The heavy weight of someone's gaze. She opened her eyes and looked around. At first, she saw nothing, but then, across the street, half hidden in the shadows of a tall wall, stood a figure. He was tall, wearing a long coat that swayed in the wind. His face was partly hidden by the hood, but she could see the glint of his eyes, human eyes, watching her closely. Kira's chest tightened. Humans had never been kind to her. She thought of running, but where would she go? Her legs were stiff from the cold. She stayed where she was, staring back. The man took a step forward. Her heart pounded. Another step, slow, steady, like he wasn't afraid of her or the place they were in. When he reached the edge of the light, she saw his face clearly. He looked older than most humans. She'd seen hairlines around his eyes, but not cruel ones. His eyes were warm, which was strange in a place this cold. He stopped a few feet away. Without a word, he reached into his pry. He reached into his coat and pulled out something. Kira tensed, ready to run if it was a weapon. But it wasn't. It was a small container. Steam rising from the top. The smell hit her. First hot soup, thick and rich. Her stomach twisted with hunger. He held it out toward her. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice calm. Kira didn't move. She had heard those words before, and they never ended well. The man slowly bent down, placed the container on the ground in front of her, and stepped back. The warmth from the soup rose into the cold air, wrapping around her like invisible hands. Her fingers twitched. She wanted to grab it, drink it all in one go, but her eyes stayed on the man. He didn't move, just stood there, waiting. Finally, after a long silence, he spoke again. "You look like you haven't eaten in days." She said nothing. The last time she had spoken to a stranger, she had almost been sold to a mining crew. The man didn't push her. Instead, he nodded, turned, and walked away down the street. His steps faded until the only sound left was the hum of the neon lights. Kira stared at the container for a long time. She told herself not to touch it. that it could be poisoned, but the smell was too much. Her hunger was stronger than her fear. She picked it up with shaky hands. The first sip burned her tongue, but she didn't care. It was the first real warmth she had felt in months. As she drank, she kept glancing down the street. The man was gone. But she couldn't shake the feeling that he had left more than just food behind. Somehow, she knew this was not the last time she would see him, and far away, in the shadows, the man watched her finish every drop. A small smile formed on his face. Then he turned and disappeared into the mist. The next night, the lower streets of Orion 5 were just as cold. The mist was thicker, curling around the corners like it wanted to hide something. Kira sat in the same place as before. Her blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her stomach was not empty this time. The soup from the night before still warmed her memory, but hunger was never far away here. She had told herself it was a one-time thing. The man was gone, and she would never see him again. But a small part of her kept looking down the street, listening for footsteps, watching the shadows for a tall figure in a long coat. Hours passed. People came and went. Drones floated overhead, scanning faces and moving on. Kira stayed still, her eyes half closed, pretending to be asleep, and then she felt it again. That same heavy feeling, like someone's gaze was pressing against her skin. Her eyes snapped open. Across the street, standing in almost the exact same spot as before, was the man. He didn't move at first, just watched her quietly. The mist swirled around him, making him look almost unreal. Then he stepped forward, slow and steady. Kira's heart pounded. She thought of running, but her legs didn't move. The man reached into his coat again. She tensed. This time, it wasn't a container of soup. It was a folded piece of cloth, thick, clean, and dark blue. He knelt down, placed it gently on the ground, and said, "It's warmer than that blanket." His voice was calm, like the night before, but there was something else this time, a tone that almost sounded like concern. Kira didn't answer. She stared at the cloth. It looked soft, but she couldn't trust it yet. The man didn't push her. Instead, he stepped back again, keeping a distance between them. "I'm Eli," he said finally. The name hung in the cold air. Kira stayed silent. She wasn't going to tell him her names were dangerous. He didn't seem surprised by her silence. "I saw you yesterday," Eli continued, "and I knew you were in trouble." Kira's eyes narrowed. Trouble was normal here, but the way he said it made her uneasy. It sounded like he knew more than he should. "Why?" she asked finally, her voice low and rough from disuse. Eli tilted his head. "Because I've seen people vanish from these streets," he said, "and I don't want that to happen to you." Kira's chest tightened. Nobody talked like that here. Nobody cared. It made no sense. She didn't know this man, and yet he had fed her. Now he was offering her warmth. "Take it," Eli said, nodding toward the folded cloth. Kira hesitated, but the cold wind decided for her. She leaned forward, grabbed it quickly, and pulled it over her shoulders. It was heavier than it looked, and the warmth sank into her bones almost immediately. For a moment, she forgot to be suspicious. Eli watched her, his eyes soft but unreadable. Then he said something that made her freeze. "They're looking for you." The warmth vanished in an instant, replaced by fear. Kira's fingers tightened around the cloth. Her mind raced too. How did he know? She forced her voice to stay steady. "Who's looking for me?" "The wrong kind of people," Eli said, his gaze scanning the street as if expecting someone to appear. He took a slow step closer. "If we stay here, they'll find you." Kira's instincts screamed at her to run. She didn't trust him. How could she? But the way he spoke made her believe he wasn't lying. The shadows between the buildings seemed darker now, heavier, and then, from somewhere far away, came the faint, mechanical thump of metal feet. Security drones didn't walk like that. This sound was heavier, more deliberate. It made the ground vibrate just enough for Kira to feel it in her legs. Eli's eyes met hers. "You hear that?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "They're getting closer," he said, his voice lower now. "You need to come with me now." Every instinct told her not to follow. Every lesson she had learned on these streets said never go with strangers. But the sound was growing louder, and in that moment, she had to choose between a man she didn't trust and something in the dark that might not let her live to see another night. Eli reached out his hand. Kira stared at it, her heartbeat in her ears. The thumping was close now, too close. She could almost see shapes moving in the fog behind him. Something tall, with glowing red eyes. She made her choice. Her small, cold hand slid into his. Without a word, Eli pulled her into the shadows. The sound of pursuit followed them, and for the first time, Kira realized this man wasn't just giving her food or warmth. He was pulling her into something much bigger. The cold air stung Kira's face as Eli pulled her through the narrow back alleys. The lower district of Orion 5 was a maze of broken metal walls, dripping pipes, and flickering lights every few seconds. She glanced over her shoulder. Through the mist, she could see them tall, thin machines with glowing red eyes, moving with slow but certain steps. They weren't rushing. They didn't have to. Hunters never lost their target. Eli moved quickly, but not carelessly. He seemed to know exactly where to go. Turning left when the noise behind them grew louder, taking sharp rights into dark paths. Where the fog was thick, Kira's breath came fast. She wasn't used to running this much. Her legs ached, and the heavy cloth around her shoulders dragged at her. But she didn't dare drop it. Finally, Eli stopped beside a rusted service door. He tapped a code into the old panel, and the lock clicked open. He pushed her inside and followed. Shutting the door behind them, the noise of the hunters faded. But Kira could still feel the vibration on the floor. They were close. The room was dim, lit only by a single hanging light bulb. Dust floated in the air, and the walls were covered with strange marking symbols she didn't recognize. There was a metal table in the middle, covered with old maps and data pads. This wasn't just some random hiding spot. Eli walked over to the table and spread one of the maps. It showed the lower district, but with secret tunnels and marked areas Kira had never seen before. "You can't stay out there anymore," Eli said without looking up. "They'll find you sooner or later, and when they do, you won't survive." Kira stayed near the door, her back against the cold wall. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "Why do you care?" she asked. Eli looked at her then, his eyes sharp but calm. "Because I know who you are." The words hit her like a punch. She tried to hide her reaction, but she couldn't stop her fingers from tightening around the cloth. "No, you don't," she said quickly. Eli shook his head slowly. "You're Kira of the Velen colony," he said, his voice quieter now. "The last survivor." Her heart froze. Nobody here knew that name. She hadn't heard it spoken out loud in years. "Your people," Eli continued, "were destroyed by the Syndicate 3 years ago." He pointed to one of the maps. "They wiped out every ship, every settlement. Except you." Kira's throat felt tight. She had spent years trying to forget that night, the fire in the sky, the screaming, the cold silence after. "How do you know this?" she asked, her voice breaking slightly. Eli reached into his coat and pulled something out. It was small, silver, and familiar. A necklace, her mother's necklace. Kira stepped forward without thinking. She took it from his hand and stared at it. Her fingers traced the worn edges. It was real. It was hers. Her chest ached like someone had opened an old wound. "I found it," Eli said. "In the ruins of your colony?" Kira looked up sharply. You were there?" He nodded. "I've been looking for you ever since." The room felt smaller now. Every instinct told her to get away. This man knew too much about her past, but he had also given her food, warmth, and now this. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice sharper now. Eli didn't answer right away. He folded the map slowly, then looked her straight in the eyes. "I want to keep you alive," he said, "but you have to come with me." Kira shook her head. "I'm not going anywhere with you." Eli's expression didn't change, but his voice grew colder. "If you stay, the syndicate will find you," he said, "and they won't kill you quickly." Silence filled the room. Kira could still hear the faint thump of the hunters' feet somewhere outside. She imagined their red eyes scanning the streets, searching for her. She imagined their cold, metal hands dragging her away. Eli stepped closer. "I have a safe place," he said. "Somewhere they can't reach you." Kira backed away, her hand brushing against the cold metal door handle. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I've heard that before." Something in the air shifted. The light bulb above them flickered. The floor vibrated again, stronger this time. Kira's eyes widened. "They're here," she whispered. Eli grabbed a small device from the table and stuffed the maps into his coat. "We don't have time," he said. "You can decide later. If you trust me right now, you just need to survive." The door rattled as something heavy slammed against it. The thin walls shook. Kira stepped back. Clutching the necklace, her mind screamed not to follow him. But the sound of metal tearing apart made the choice for her. Eli pulled open a second door at the back of the room, one she hadn't noticed before. It led into a narrow tunnel filled with steam and the smell of oil. He reached out his hand again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed his hand, and together they ran into the dark behind them. The front door gave way with a loud crash. The hunters had found their trail. And whatever was waiting ahead was the only thing between Kira and the end of her story. The tunnel was narrow and low. Steam hissed from broken pipes, making the air thick and damp. Kira's footsteps echoed against the metal floor, mixed with Eli's quick, steady pace ahead of her. Behind them, the sound of the hunters followed slow. Heavy thumps, growing louder. The walls dripped with moisture every few meters. Dim orange lights flickered, barely strong enough to cut through the mist. Kira's breath came in short gasps. Her legs burned. But Eli never slowed. He moved like someone who had walked these tunnels 100 times before. "Where are we going?" She called out between breaths. Eli didn't look back. "Somewhere safe," he said. His voice was calm, but his shoulders were tense. That tension told her the truth. He didn't know how long they could stay ahead. The tunnel split in two. Eli turned left without hesitation. Kira followed, but not before glancing down the right path for a moment. She thought she saw movement. There's something crawling along the walls, like a shadow that had come alive. Her skin prickled, and she pushed herself to catch up to him. The thumping of the hunters faded for a few seconds. Kira let herself hope. They had lost them. Then a metallic screech echoed from behind. The sound made her teeth ache. "They're cutting through the walls," Eli said without turning. "They don't need to follow the path. We have to keep moving." They passed a row of sealed doors. Some had strange symbols painted in red. Kira's eyes kept drifting toward them. "What's behind those?" she asked. "Things you don't want to see," Eli replied. The way he said it made her believe him. The tunnel began to slope downward. The air grew warmer, but the smell changed thicker, sharper. It reminded Kira of the chemical plants she had passed when she was a child, a place where you didn't breathe too deep if you wanted to stay healthy. Suddenly, a loud clang rang out ahead. Eli stopped, holding out an arm to block her. Through the steam, a shape emerged, a small, floating drone, its lights scanning the tunnel. Not a hunter, but still dangerous. Eli pressed her against the wall, his coat brushing against her face. "Don't move," he whispered. The drone hovered closer. Its scanning light passed over them once. Then again, Kira's pulse pounded in her ears. If it detected them, it would alert the hunters. The drone paused in front of Eli. Then, with a low hum, it floated past and vanished into the mist. Eli let out a slow breath. "Come on," he said. Moving again, Kira followed, still shaking. The hunter's footsteps were faint now, but she knew they hadn't given up. They reached a wide chamber. Deep in the undercity, pipes ran along the ceiling like a web of metal veins. The floor was covered in shallow water that reflected the flickering lights above. At the far end was a heavy grate. Eli knelt and began working on the bolts. "This leads to an old maintenance tunnel," he said. "It's narrow, but they can't follow us inside." Kira watched the shadows in the water ripple. Something about the reflection didn't match the movements they were making. She opened her mouth to warn him. A loud crash from behind cut her off. The wall they had passed earlier buckled, and part of it tore open like paper. A hunter stepped through, its metal frame gleaming in the dim light. Its red eyes locked onto her immediately. Kira's body froze. The hunter's head tilted slightly, as if it were studying her. Then it took a single step forward, the water rippling with the weight. "Eli!" She shouted. He spun, saw the machine, and pulled a small device from his belt. It crackled with blue energy. He aimed and fired. The bolt struck the hunter's chest, sparks flying, but the machine barely slowed. "Get through the grate," Eli ordered, his voice sharp. Kira didn't argue. She dropped to her knees and crawled through the small opening he had managed to make. The metal scraped her arms, but she didn't stop. She heard Eli fire again, the sound echoing off the walls. The tunnel beyond was even narrower. Kira had to move on her hands and knees. Behind her, she heard Eli grunt. Then the sound of something heavy hitting the water. "Eli?" she called, panic in her voice. "I'm right here," he answered, his voice closer now. He crawled in behind her, and the grate slammed shut. The thumping footsteps stopped at the entrance. The hunter didn't try to follow. Its frame was too large. Instead, it stood there, its red eyes glowing through the bars. Kira shivered. It wasn't leaving. It was waiting. "Don't look back," Eli said softly. "We keep moving until it can't track us anymore." Kira swallowed hard and turned forward. The tunnel stretched into darkness, the air heavy with the smell of rust and oil. They crawled for what felt like hours. Finally, the narrow space opened into another chamber. This one, quieter. Eli sat back against the wall, his breathing heavy. Kira sank to the floor across from him, clutching her mother's necklace. "You said they can't follow us here," she whispered. "They can't," Eli replied. "But they can wait." Kira didn't like the way he said it, because if the hunters were patient, it meant their escape wasn't over. It had only just begun. The chamber was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the slow drip of water from somewhere above, each drop echoing in the stale air. Kira sat with her back to the wall, knees pulled close. Eli was across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, his face hidden in shadow. For a while, neither of them spoke. They were both catching their breath after the long crawl. Kira's arms and legs ached, her throat was dry, and the weight of the cloth around her shoulders felt heavier than ever. Somewhere behind them, far back in the tunnels, the hunter still waited. She could almost feel its gaze, even through layers of steel and stone. "How long will it stay there?" she asked finally. Eli looked up, his eyes dark but steady. "As long as it has to," he said. "They don't get tired. They don't get distracted. They just wait until you make a mistake." Kira didn't like that answer. She shifted uncomfortably. "I should leave," she muttered. "If I'm not near you, maybe they'll stop chasing." Eli shook his head. "It's not me there." "After," he said, his voice low but firm. They want you. Kira felt her stomach tighten. She had known this deep down. But hearing him say it made it real. She stared at him for a long moment before asking, "Why? What do they want with me?" Eli didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small, metal device. He pressed a button and the chamber was filled with a soft hum. "Signal jammer," he explained. "They won't hear us now. At least not easily." Then he looked directly at her. "You're not just the last survivor of Velen," he said. "You're carrying something they couldn't destroy when they wiped out your people." Kira frowned. "I don't have anything," she said. Eli shook his head slowly. "Not something you carry in your hands. Something inside you." She didn't like the way that sounded. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice sharper now. Eli leaned forward, lowering his voice. "The Velen were known for one thing above all else: memory." Kira blinked. "Memory?" He nodded. "Your kind could store and pass down entire histories without writing them down. Stories, maps, secrets, even codes." Kira's mind flashed to her childhood. The nights when her mother would tell her the same stories again and again, always in the same order, always with the same words she had thought. They were just bedtime tales. "You think I have codes in my head?" she asked, disbelief in her voice. "I know you do," Eli said, "because I've been to the ruins of your colony. I found the signs they left behind, the ones only you could understand." Kira shook her head. "This is crazy," she whispered. But even as she said it, she remembered how, sometimes, words from her mother's stories would play in her mind like they were etched there. Words she had never fully understood. Eli sat back, his gaze never leaving her. "The Syndicate wants those codes. They think they can use them to open something powerful, buried in the Velen archives." Kira's voice dropped to a whisper. "And you? What do you want?" For the first time, Eli looked away. He was silent for several seconds before answering. "I want to keep it out of their hands," he said finally. "And I want you to live." Kira studied him. There was something in his voice, something that didn't sound like a lie, but trust was dangerous. "Trust got you killed. Why risk your life for me?" she asked. Eli's eyes flickered. "Because someone once did the same for me," he said quietly, "and I couldn't save them. But maybe I can save you." The silence that followed was heavy. Kira didn't know what to say. She wanted to tell him she didn't need saving. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. The hum from the jammer filled the room like a blanket. Over their voices, for a brief moment, it almost felt safe here. But then a faint noise cut through the air, a low, metallic scraping. Eli's head turned sharply toward the sound. "They've moved," he said. "They're trying to find another way in." Kira's pulse quickened. "How long do we have?" Eli was already packing the maps back into his coat. "Not long enough," he said. "We have to keep moving. There's another exit deeper in the Undercity." She hesitated, clutching the necklace in her hand. If he was telling the truth, if she really carried something the Syndicate wanted, then running wouldn't be enough. They would chase her forever, but she didn't have time to think. Eli was already at the far door. Holding it open, "Come on," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes told her the truth. He was worried. Kira took one last look at the dark chamber. It was quiet now, but she knew that quiet wouldn't last. She stood, pulled the warm cloth tighter around her shoulders, and stepped through the door. The darkness swallowed them again, somewhere in the distance. The hunters were coming, and this time, Kira knew they weren't just chasing a girl. They were chasing a secret buried in her own mind. The tunnel narrowed until the walls almost scraped their shoulders. The air was warmer here, carrying the faint scent of burning oil. Kira's footsteps splashed in shallow puddles, the sound too loud in the silence. Eli's pace was quick, but Not frantic cute, he kept glancing over his shoulder, his jaw tight. They're close. He said finally. Kira didn't need him to tell her. She could feel it, the faint tremor in the ground. The almost inaudible hum of machine cores powering up. The hunters were coming. They turned a corner, and the tunnel opened into a huge chamber. Rust-covered platforms stretched over a dark pit. Steam hissed from vents, creating white clouds that curled around their legs. In the center of the chamber stood a wide steel door, sealed with a heavy locking wheel. "That's our way out," Eli said, moving toward it. Kira followed, but her eyes kept scanning the shadows above. The ceiling was high and lost in darkness. Something about it made her uneasy. Eli reached the door and began turning the wheel. It groaned loudly, the sound echoing through the chamber. Kira winced. "That's too loud," she whispered. Eli didn't stop. "Better loud than dead," he replied. The wheel finally gave way, and the door shifted slightly. But before they could push it open, a sharp metallic clang rang out from above. Kira's head snapped up through the steam. She saw movement, dark shapes sliding down the walls, their red eyes glowing. "They're here," she breathed. Eli grabbed his weapon from his coat, a compact human blaster with a glowing blue core. "Get behind me," he said. But before she could move, the first hunter dropped from above. Landing between them and the door, it was taller than the others. Its limbs heavier. The red glow in its eyes pulsed like a heartbeat. In one swift motion, it swung an arm toward Eli. He rolled to the side, firing as he moved. The bolt struck the hunter's shoulder, sending sparks flying, but the machine barely flinched. Two more hunters dropped from the shadows. One landed on the far side of the chamber, blocking their escape. The other landed closer to Kira, its gaze fixed on her. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She backed away until her heel caught the edge of the platform. One more step, and she would fall into the pit below. "Kira," Eli's voice snapped her. "Back. Stay low." He fired again, hitting the hunter near her in the leg. It staggered, giving her enough time to drop to her knees and crawl behind a vent pipe. The big hunter turned toward Eli, its chest panels shifting with a mechanical hiss. It raised an arm, and a small barrel slid into place, glowing red at the tip. "Down." Eli shouted. A beam of searing light shot across the chamber, striking the wall and showering them with sparks. Kira's mind raced. They couldn't win like this. The hunters were stronger, faster, but something Eli had said earlier returned. To her, the Velen training her mother had taught her, hidden in bedtime stories. Weak points in syndicate machines. The core, she remembered. The core is always the key from her hiding spot. She scanned the big hunter, there a faint glow. Under its chest plating, it was small, but she could see it flicker with every movement. She looked at Eli. "Shoot the core." She shouted. He glanced at her, surprise in his eyes. Then he saw where she was pointing. He fired. The first shot bounced off the armor. The second shot hit closer. The hunter stumbled back, its movements jerky. The third shot struck the core. Dead-on blue light exploded from the impact, and the machine collapsed to its knees before falling forward. Silent, the other two hunters froze for half a second. Then they moved again, faster than before. Kira didn't think she grabbed a loose piece of metal from the floor. The closer hunter swung an arm at her, but she ducked low and drove the metal shard into the thin joint at its side. The machine spasmed, sparks sprang into her face. Eli fired over her shoulder, finishing it off. The last hunter lunged at Eli. They crashed into the railing, teetering dangerously over the pit. Kira's heart stopped. She ran toward them. Eli struggled, his weapon knocked from his hand. The hunter's claws were inches from his throat. Kira didn't hesitate. She grabbed Eli's blaster from the ground, aimed at the glowing point near the machine's back, and fired. The bolt tore through the plating. The hunter froze, then toppled forward into the pit. Disappearing into the dark below, silence filled the chamber, broken only by the hiss of steam. Kira's hands trembled as she lowered the weapon. Eli picked himself up, breathing hard. He gave her a long look, half surprise, half pride. "Not bad," he said. She managed a weak smile. "You're welcome." They turned back to the steel door. Eli pushed it open, and cold air rushed in from the other side, but before they stepped through, Kira glanced back at the chamber. The hunters lay still, their red eyes dim for the first time. She realized she had fought back and won, but she also knew this wasn't the end. If they could find her here, they could find her anywhere. And now, she wasn't just running, she was ready to fight. The steel door groaned as it swung open. Cold night air poured in, cutting through the lingering heat of the battle. Kira stepped out first, her boots crunching against loose gravel. Eli followed, pulling the door shut behind them. The sound of metal locking echoed in the empty space. They were outside the Undercity now. The stars above Orion 5 stretched wide and clear for the first time in days. Kira could breathe without smelling rust or oil. They stood on a rocky plateau at the edge of the city below. Distant lights glowed from the upper districts. Farther still, the black shape of the spaceport rose against the horizon. A few cargo ships drifted lazily into the sky, their engines leaving glowing trails. "That's where we're going," Eli said, nodding toward the spaceport. Kira stared at it. It seemed impossibly far away. "Won't they be waiting for us there?" she asked. "Probably," Eli said, without hesitation. "But we have one thing they don't." She frowned. "What's that?" He smiled faintly. Kira didn't know how to respond. Her instinct was to roll her eyes, to call it nonsense. But after everything they had survived, the chase, the tunnels, the hunters, part of her believed him. Not because she felt strong, but because she was still alive. And that had to mean something. They began walking along a narrow path that hugged the cliff edge. The wind howled around them, carrying the distant hum of city life. Eli moved with quiet confidence, his eyes scanning the shadows. Kira followed close, her fingers still curled around her mother's necklace. After a while, she asked, "Where will we go if we make it off-world?" Eli glanced at her. "There's a place in the Outer Belt small colony. Mostly human traders and drifters," he said. "They don't care where you're from, only that you pull your weight." Kira tried to imagine it a place where no one cared that she was Velen. A place where she could walk the streets without hiding her face. The thought was almost too much to believe. They stopped at a ridge overlooking the spaceport. From here, they could see patrol drones moving in slow circles. Eli crouched, pulling out a small device. It unfolded into a pair of binocular-like lenses. He scanned the area for a long moment before speaking. "Security's heavier than I thought," he muttered. "They're not just guarding the ships, they're looking for someone." Kira didn't need to ask who. The knot in her stomach tightened. "Then, how do we get in?" she asked. Eli lowered the lenses. "There's an old maintenance gate on the far side," he said. "It hasn't been used in years, but if the power's still connected, I can open it." They moved quickly, keeping low along the rocky edge. Twice they had to stop and hide as patrol drones passed overhead. Each time, Kira's heart pounded until the hum faded. By the time they reached the far side of the port, her legs ached and her throat was dry. The maintenance gate was half buried in sand and dust. Its control panel was cracked, but still faintly glowing. Eli knelt and began working on it. Kira kept watch, scanning the shadows for movement. Minutes passed. Finally, with a soft beep, the gate shuddered and slid open just enough for them to slip through. Inside, the spaceport was alive with noise. Engines rumbling, metal crates clanging, workers shouting over the coms. The smell of fuel and ozone filled the air. They moved through the shadows along the back wall, avoiding the main walkways. Kira spotted their target before Eli did a small freighter. Its hull patched and worn, but sturdy. It looked fast enough to outrun trouble. "That one," she whispered, pointing. Eli followed her gaze. "Good eye," he said. "It's unregistered perfect." They reached the ship just as a distant alarm began to wail. Kira's blood went cold. "They know we're here," she said. Eli didn't answer. He was already at the ramp, tapping in an override code. The ramp lowered with a hiss, and they ran inside. The interior was cramped but functional. Eli moved straight to the cockpit, flicking switches and bringing the systems online. Kira strapped herself into the co-pilot seat. Through the viewport, she could see movement security units rushing toward them. "Eli," she said. "I see them," he replied. The engines roared to life, the whole ship trembling under the power. The ramp closed just as the first shots rang out. Blaster fire sparked against the hull. Eli gritted his teeth and pushed the throttle. Forward, the freighter lifted from the ground, engines screaming. Kira gripped the seat as the ship shot into the night sky. Leaving the spaceport behind, the city of Orion 5 grew smaller beneath them. The stars ahead were wide and endless. Kira let out a slow breath. They weren't safe, not yet, but for the first time, she felt the possibility. Eli glanced at her. "You did good back there," he said. She met his gaze. "So did you." They sat in silence for a while, the hum of the engines filling the space. Kira looked down at the necklace in her hands. The metal was warm from her grip. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, words from the old stories, words she now knew might hold more meaning than she had ever realized. She didn't know what the future would bring. The Syndicate would keep hunting her. The codes in her mind were still a mystery, but she wasn't alone anymore. Eli had given her something she thought she'd lost forever. Not just safety, but a place where she could belong, somewhere beyond the stars. A new life was waiting, and Kira was ready to meet it.